This is part 4 of Adeila, written by Huff. Life in a lung. While polio only mildly affected some people, others had their bodies ravished by the disease. Unfortunately, Adelia's body was one of those nearly destroyed by polio. As fear of this disease grew, the medical field struggled to contain the spread of polio in the only way available to them, through isolation. As a result, when admitted to St. Francis Hospital, the staff whisked Adeila into an isolation room filled with other polio patients. Adelia's health progressively deteriorated. Within hours, a medical team placed Adeila in an iron lung. Have you ever seen an iron lung? If not, it will be hard for you to relate to an 8-year-old girl surrounded by strangers who are trying to put you in a machine that looks like it's going to eat you alive. Let me assure you that if the disease did not kill you, fright from a stranger closing you up inside the belly of one of these machines could certainly do the trick. Today's respirator is yesterday's iron lung. The iron lung regulated the air pressure in the airtight metal tube, causing the chest cavity to rise and fall, which forced the lungs to inhale and exhale, allowing the occupant to breathe through manual manipulation. Although the iron lung may have looked like a monster, I am extremely grateful the iron lung was available, not only for the sake of my sister, but also for the other polio victims whose lives were saved by the use of the iron lung. One end of an iron lung has a large opening. This opening is where the patient's head extended from the cavity of the machine. Although the looks of this machine is quite intimidating, I am certain the severity of Adelia's illness made her obvious to the looks of this monster that would be her home for the next 13 months of her life. On the first night Adeila was admitted to the hospital, the doctors delivered the tragic news to my parents that she would probably not live through the night. The doctors, however, had not taken into consideration the fight this little 8-year-old girl had in her heart and soul. She was stubborn, she was strong, and she wanted to live. Mom always thought that Adelia's determination to live came from her strong desire to see her baby sister. No one dreamed it would take years to fulfill this desire. For the next 13 months, Adeila lived in her iron lung with paralysis that left her unable to move anything but one little finger and the ability to blink her eyes. Polio had stripped her of any form of mobility. Blinking became her method of communicating with the medical professionals and my parents. They would ask her questions that she answered by blinking, whether one blink indicating yes or one blink indicating no. I do not remember. Regardless, the important thing is Adelia found a way to communicate. Dad loved telling that if Adelia was in a snit about something, if she was blinking those near black eyes, someone better be paying attention. To Adelia's credit, she was one spunky little girl, and it was the spunk which kept her alive. Although Adelia had spunk and determination, boredom was the biggest immediate problem to overcome. She said there were many times when she felt she was going to explode from lying there with nothing to do. The nurses did everything they could to make the time pass pleasurably for Adelia and the other patients. A radio was always playing, and because of this diverse ages of patients, the station changed daily to give everyone a chance to hear their type of music. The nurses told them stories about themselves or amusing tales of things that happened in the hospital. Doctors, nurses, volunteers, and other staff did everything they could to make the time pass for the patients. But there was lots of time to fill. Adelia spent hours reading. Adelia's iron lung was equipped with an apparatus that held a book or magazine, allowing her to read or look at pictures. Of course, Adelia, as well as the patients in the ward, had to rely on the nursing staff to turn the pages for them. Therefore, reading even a small book could take hours. Adelia told me that waiting for someone to turn her page gave her lots of time to escape into her imagination, becoming a part of whatever she was reading. Many times she was a princess, a teacher, or maybe a bird. She went to places with giant castles, fields of flowers, and huge animals that were pets. Places where she could laugh, run, and talk. Even with her imagination, Adelia felt that time passed the quickest when she had a visitor and they could actually read to her. She had lots of visitors, but not every hour of the day. Fortunately, there were many volunteers, and these volunteers read to the patients daily. Therapy activities filled a good portion of the day, too. Because of her paralysis, her limbs required therapy several times a day to prevent her muscles from becoming atrophied. Regardless of the hours of reading or hours of the therapy, Adeila proclaimed that her biggest enemy was boredom. Alas, after 13 months of taking large doses of penicillin and other medications, Adelia's respiratory system began to respond. Finally, Adelia was able to breathe on her own. However, the process of removing Adelia from the confines of her iron lung was a slow process. Adelia and the iron lung, united as one for 13 months, were about to be separated. Talk of this separation terrified Adelia. Thankfully, the weaning process took time, giving Adelia the time she needed to become accustomed to breathing on her own. When the doctors finally told Adelia it was time to remove her from the iron lung, she had been breathing on her own for several hours. Adelia, watched closely over the next several days, showed no signs of a relapse. Adelia had beaten the odds. Adelia had lived. Now Adelia faced some of the greatest struggles she would have in her lifetime. Here is a close-up picture of what Adelia spent 13 months in an iron lung like this one. Photo courtesy of the Sisters of the Third Order of St. Francis. The decision. Adelia's fragile body required careful handling. Polio left Adelia's body crippled internally and externally. She had damaged lungs, a weakened heart, a double S in her spine, and leg muscles so damaged she could no longer move her legs. The doctors feared Adelia would never walk again. The doctors doubted that even with years of surgery, therapy, and rehabilitation, Adelia would gain enough mobility to enable her to walk. The surgery to straighten Adelia's spine was dangerous in that she could lose what little mobility polio had left her. The doctors felt surgery to straighten Adelia's spine would have little effect on the mobility of her legs. Yet without the spine surgery, Adelia's legs would gain nearly nothing from the rigors of therapy and rehabilitation. However, the doctors felt her weakened arm muscles would respond eagerly to rehabilitation. The doctor's grim outlook on the effects of surgery to Adelia's spine was devastating news for my parents. What decision were they to make? Adelia, on the other hand, had a different attitude on this "Never Walk Again" song that the doctors were singing. When given the doctor's bleak outlook, Adelia looked at them square in the face and empathetically stated, "Yes, I will walk." Mom and Dad decided that with Adelia's determination's attitude, she deserved any and every chance available that might allow her to walk again. Adelia was determined that nothing and no one was going to stop her from walking. Once again, Adelia's strong will served her well. Adelia had surgery on her spine several times to remove the S that was there, or rather to remove as much as it could be removed. For the rest of her life, Adelia had a curvature in her spine which caused her head to tilt slightly toward her right shoulder. Between each surgery, she would have to maintain the vigorous regimen of physical therapy that strengthened and developed her weakened muscles. She did her therapy faithfully, even though it was exhausting. There were times when she would cry because she did not want to do the exercises, but for the most part, she did the exercises without any fuss. Adelia worked hard at doing each exercise correctly, and she pushed herself to do better each time. She was determined that she was going to walk. Of course, being a child myself, I thought Mom and Dad were cruel for making Adelia do these things that made her weep with pain. I have come to realize that Mom and Dad hurt and cried with equal pain each time Adelia's courage faltered. Adelia would not have been human if she did not have times of sadness and self-pity. For Mom and Dad, watching their precious daughter struggle to live a normal life was as painful as it was for Adelia. However, Adelia's resolve was strong, and her pity parties were few and far apart. She knew that she did not have time to dwell on what if and why me. Adelia knew that if she wanted to walk again, she had to work and work hard. In the end, all the pain, the hundreds of hours of work, the efforts of not only Adelia but also Mom and Dad and the therapists, along with the buckets of sweat and tears, were worth every precious moment. Adelia was able to walk. Adelia's homecoming. Because I was so young, I have no personal knowledge of the early years of Adelia's illness and recovery. With both of my parents deceased, my source of direct information about Adelia's early years is gone. One of my greatest regrets is that I did not have more conversations with my parents regarding Adelia's illness and recovery. Left with the beats I remember, along with what Mom and Dad told me over the years, is all the information I have on which to base my writing. I am sure there are many things about Adelia, many things that she and my parents had to endure that are unknown to me, which I am living out of the story. Some of my writings are speculations and some are what I pieced together from Norman, Peggy, and Adelia's friends. I know there is much more, but this will have to be enough. After years of recuperation, Adelia was able to come home. The house was a beehive of activity in anticipation of Adelia's revival. Weeks of preparation had gone into planning her homecoming. This large preparation was making a bedroom for Adelia. Adelia was unable to navigate stair steps, which made the second-floor bedrooms inaccessible to her. Therefore, the dining room, located next to the kitchen, became Adelia's new bedroom. Adelia's homecoming was a momentous day. Not only was Adelia going to see me for the first time, she was going to meet another baby sister. On January 9th, 1952, Mom and Dad had a third daughter, Peggy. Peggy and I were 16 months apart and always getting into some kind of mischief. However, on this day, we were too excited to think about mischief. We spent most of the morning running to the end of the driveway to peer up the street for any sign of the family car. Here is a close-up of a picture from 1959, family picture of Dad, Mom, Carol, Adelia, and Peggy. Finally, we spotted the car turning off the highway onto our street. Peggy and I rushed inside to tell everyone that Dad and Adelia were coming. Because the day of Adelia's homecoming was Easter, the house was full of family members, including Grandma and Grandpa Groff, Aunt Maud, and Uncle Carol, and other relatives. Adelia was thrilled to see everyone, as everyone was thrilled to see her. Although there were too many people to have us sit around the table dinner, there was no complaining about the eat where you can find a spot arrangement. The day was full of laughter, hugs, kisses, and tears of joy. Although bedtime came with exhaustion, sleep came with dreams of a bright future. Finally, all of us were home under one roof. Here's a close-up picture of the image of Easter of 1955 when Adelia came home. Adelia was 13 years old. Dad is holding Adelia firmly since she could not stand alone long enough for picture taking. That is all for part 4. In part 5, we will start with school, friends, and parties.